You're listening to DNA ID, brought to you by AbJack Entertainment. Be sure to check out some of the other great true crime podcasts from this network, including The Murder in My Family, Missing Persons, Scene of the Crime, Zodiac Speaking, Beyond Bizarre True Crime, Campus Killings, Below the Surface, and Killer Communications. All of these podcasts are available for you to binge on right now, wherever you listen to podcasts. Subscribe where you're listening to this podcast so you don't miss an episode.
It was 2003. On Monday, March 3rd, Officer Jeff Garner was on duty as a daytime motorcycle officer in the traffic division of North Richland Hills, Texas PD. His day-to-day job was fairly routine. The uniformed officer patrolled the streets, enforcing traffic laws, issuing citations, and coming to the aid of civilians in need of police assistance on the streets. North Richland Hills, a suburb of Dallas consisting of 70,000 residents, was rated one of the best places to live by U.S. News & World Report for 2025 to 2026. The residents of the town are generally young professionals and families. It's considered a peaceful, harmonious community. In short, Officer Garner did not anticipate what was about to happen to him. In the early afternoon, the uniformed officer was working a traffic detail in the 7100 block of Bursey Road. With him were three other officers, his partner, Officer James George, Officer Espy, and Officer Worsham. They had set up a speed trap on the corner of Bursey and Beating Lane and were running laser speed detectors on eastbound and westbound traffic on Bursey Road. At 1:43 p.m., Officers Worsham and Espy were both executing traffic stops down the street, and Garner and George were sitting astride their police-issued motorcycles when a very dirty red Jeep turned eastbound on Bursey, turning off of northbound Western Oaks Drive. The Jeep was not speeding, stopped appropriately at the stop sign, and did not appear to pay the motorcycle officers any attention as it drove by adhering to the speed limit. As it passed by the officers, though, they noticed some egregious violations. The Jeep did not have a front license plate or an inspection sticker or a registration sticker displayed on its front window. Observing this, Officer Garner made sure to look at the rear plate as the Jeep passed. The rear license plate was a paper plate with black lettering, which was not a temporary tag issued in Texas. Quote, "The paper plate appeared very unofficial, and both George and I commented upon it as it not looking right. I told George I wanted to get a better look at the plate and consequently started my motorcycle and turned eastbound on Bursey to follow the Jeep. At the time I turned out, the Jeep was approximately 25 to 35 yards in front of me." All that from Officer Garner. I'm sure you've heard police officers say that there's no such thing as a routine traffic stop, but I doubt that Officer Garner had that on his mind as he followed behind the Jeep. At that point, he was simply checking out the situation. He said in a report, quote, "At this point, I had not decided to conduct a traffic stop with the Jeep, but only planned on following it to inspect the paper tag displayed on the rear," end quote. As he caught up with the Jeep, which he did gradually, no lights or siren on, he saw the tag was Louisiana and had the number L and 6 numbers. The clean white paper plate also had 2 stickers on it that resembled month and year registration stickers that had formerly been used on Texas license plates. What looked like masking tape or cardboard peeked out from under one side of the plate. Basically, Garner said, quote, "The plate appeared very much to be nothing more than a computer printout on a letter-sized piece of paper. It appeared to be wrapped around either a piece of cardboard or the legitimate license plates where it was mounted on the left end of the rear bumper," end quote. The paper Louisiana plate was bogus. Garner continued to follow behind the Jeep, trying to get a feel for the driver in the situation and deciding where to execute a stop. He had just made up his mind to stop the vehicle when suddenly, despite him not having his lights on or making any kind of signal, the Jeep pulled over to the curb and stopped in the 7200 block of Bercy. Garner pulled over behind the Jeep and switched off his bike. He turned on the digital audio recorder he wore on his belt and prepared to dismount the bike when the Jeep suddenly drove off. It didn't do the squealing tires thing, but drove off at a normal speed. Well, that was suspicious. Garner restarted his bike and turned on his red and blue lights. As he pursued the Jeep, he radioed to dispatch his location and that he was in pursuit of a red Jeep. He did not know that his radio wasn't working because he had failed to turn off his digital audio recorder. The Jeep failed to pull over, so Garner turned on his siren and gave chase eastbound on Bercy. The Jeep sped up. Garner radioed to his partner George for backup, still unaware the dispatch was not receiving his radio traffic. Garner stayed about 30 yards behind the Jeep as it picked up speed and navigated the curves on Bercy. When they got to the four-way stop at the intersection with Smithfield, the Jeep blew right through it, not slowing. It even got a little air as it blasted over a bump. The Jeep proceeded southbound on Smithfield, and then it left the roadway on the right-hand side up over the curb into a grassy field, bordering the west side of the 7900 block of Smithfield. At this point, I'm going to quote from Officer Jeff Garner's official statement about the incident, as his words really describe it best. Quote, "I initially believed the Jeep was yielding to me and pulling over to stop. I called out on the radio advising this and slowed my motorcycle in preparation to stop. As I was calling out on the radio, I observed the Jeep to not stop, but instead accelerate rapidly in the field, throwing up two large rooster tails of mud and grass from its rear wheels. Knowing there was no escape route through the field, I brought my motorcycle to a stop in the roadway, just beyond where the Jeep had entered the field. As I did this, I observed the Jeep to be turning back east toward the roadway. I believed the driver intended to execute a U-turn and continue fleeing by backtracking northbound on Smithfield. I put my kickstand down and started to draw my weapon. As I believed the Jeep was going to turn back northbound and pass me on my left side, east side of the roadway, I intended to dismount my motorcycle on the high side, placing it between me and the Jeep, and cover the driver with my weapon as he passed. As I began to take action on this plan, the Jeep, which appeared to be turning gradually, accelerated and turned sharply. This served to swing the rear of the Jeep around and place it in a position in which it was coming directly at me head-on as I was in the process of dismounting my motorcycle. I immediately believed the driver of the Jeep intended to run me down. At this point, the Jeep was extremely close to me and accelerating over the distance. Fearing for my safety, I simply stepped off my motorcycle, allowing it to fall, and attempted to get out of the Jeep's path by running for the grass at the edge of the roadway. As I stepped away from my motorcycle, I observed the driver bring a handgun up from below the window line. As I recall, it was in his left hand, and he brought it up along the inside of the door and over the driver's side windowsill, at which time the driver pointed the weapon at me. Seeing the revolver and recognizing the threat, there was little I could do. I was in the process of trying to escape being run over and had no cover. My weapon was still holstered. Consequently, I dove for the grass on the west side of the roadway." End quote. All that from Officer Garner. As he dove, he heard the shots. Bang, 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 bang. 4 shots, he thought, as he hit the ground. The Jeep sped by him and down the road. Garner knew immediately he was hit. As he dove, he took a bullet in what felt like his heel. As the Jeep sped away, Garner sat in the empty field, legs stretched out in front of him, and drew his weapon. He fired multiple shots at the rear of the Jeep, aiming for the back window where he could see the driver's head. He got off 8 rounds before the Jeep turned a corner and out of range, heading westbound on Smithfield and out of view. Garner could not be certain whether any of his bullets had found their target. Once the Jeep was out of view, Garner got on his radio and requested an ambulance and described the suspect vehicle and the direction of travel. It took him a few minutes to realize he wasn't receiving any answer from dispatch or any other patrol unit. That's when he realized his radio was off because his digital audio recorder was switched on. He finally switched the radio on and was able to reach dispatch at 1:33 p.m. Moments later, a tan minivan stopped in the roadway directly in front of Officer Garner. A woman in the passenger seat put down her window and asked if he was okay. Several other vehicles stopped as well. They had all noticed the police motorcycle lying in the road. Some of the citizens helped the officer support his leg in an elevated position because blood and a bullet hole were clearly visible in his right boot. Then his partner, Officer George, pulled up and fire department medics arrived, followed by probably most of the North Richland Hills on-duty police officers. Garner had been shot in the lower leg. The bullet pierced his jackboot, passed through his leg, and exited the other side. He was very, very lucky to be alive. The shooting had occurred near some North Richland Hills schools, which immediately went into lockdown. North Richland Hills cops swarmed the area, but as reported by the Fort Worth Star-Telegram, quote, at that time in 2003, police had to pick up a phone and call each neighboring police agency to relay information about who they were looking for. Then dispatchers had to relay that information to officers on patrol. It created delays of a few minutes, end quote. So while police fanned over major area roadways to try to get a glimpse of the red Jeep, they could not cover every residential street, and the suspect may have been familiar with the area as he managed to avoid detection and drove off into the sunset. As is typical in officer-involved shootings, the scene was meticulously processed for every ounce of evidence and a reconstruction done so investigators could get a grasp on what happened and who shot at whom. CSI E. Luna responded to the scene and roped off the whole area so it was preserved. He found one of the suspect's bullets buried in the dirt in the field where Officer Garner had taken a flying leap. The bullet that hit Officer Garner struck him in the ankle area of his right boot and passed through the boot, through his sock into his right ankle, out the left side of his right leg, 6 inches above the ankle, through the sock and out the left side of the boot. The bullet was not found. Detective A.S. Roten was the lead investigator. He took possession of Officer Garner's duty weapon with magazine, personal digital recorder, right boot, and duty belt. He listened to the recording of the incident on Garner's recording device. He heard him say that he was going to stop a red Jeep with Louisiana buyer's plates in the 7300 block of Bercy Road. He asked for his partner James George to come up here with me. He said the plate looked fake. He then shouted that the vehicle was going through the field at 7900 Smithfield and yelled, "Holy shit." At 1:28 p.m., on the digital counter were what sounded like at least 2 gunshots, and then at 1:29 p.m., 8 gunshots, which was apparently Officer Garner returning fire at the suspect. At the end of the recording, Garner said, "Send headquarters, I'm shot, send a squad, I have 1 round through the leg." CSI Luna found 8 shell casings in the field where Garner had been shot. They were from his duty weapon, an H&K .45 caliber semi-automatic. Luna also found 1 fired copper bullet jacket from a .38 caliber in the same area. When all the CSIing was complete and the evidence charted, it seemed the driver of the Jeep had fired upon Garner a minimum of 5 times, and Garner's gun had discharged 8 bullets. Officer Garner went through a hypnosis session to enhance his recall of the incident, but the information he related was no different than what he had already related. He had very clear recall of the Jeep. His notes say it was a red-colored 2-door Jeep with a black soft top. It was an older model, a CJ7 or a Wrangler, probably a late 80s model. The vehicle did not have a front license plate, nor did it have inspection or registration stickers on the front windshield. The vehicle did not have any other stickers on the front or rear windows. The rear bumper was black and appeared to be original equipment. Quote, at this time, I'm unable to remember if the Jeep had a spare tire mounted on the rear. However, the Louisiana buyer's license plate was mounted on the bottom left, driver's side, of the rear bumper, end quote. Garner thought the tag numbers possibly started with L09. Quote, the Jeep was equipped with oversized tires slightly larger than stock. They were not significantly wider or fatter, but they did appear to be taller and have a moderately aggressive tread pattern. The overall condition of the Jeep was fair. I did not see any significant damage or dents. The paint appeared dull, and it was fairly dirty, in that it was not muddy, but did appear to be dusty and unwashed. The Jeep had 4 floodlights with KC written on the covers across the front of the vehicle. Garner wrote a report about his recollection of the Jeep driver. Quote, during this incident, I saw the driver of the Jeep on 2 occasions, both only briefly. I first saw him as he passed Officer George and I on Bercy. I saw the left side of his face and upper body from the shoulders up. The vehicle was driven by a white male, which was the only occupant visible to me. As he passed George and I, he did not seem to pay us any mind, and I don't believe he even turned his head to look at us. Our presence there did not cause him to register any sign of alarm that I could see, and he continued eastbound on Bercy at a normal speed. I saw him the second time through the front windshield of the Jeep as he drove towards me and opened fire. He appeared to be a white male in his mid to upper 30s. He looked to be heavy-set and of a stocky build. From his height in the Jeep's window, he did not appear to be overly tall. I would estimate his height at between 5'7" and 5'10". He had no facial hair that I could see. It is possible that he had a mustache, but definitely not a beard. His hair was dark in color and was cut short, but not buzzed or trimmed close in any manner. It is possible that he was wearing a baseball-style cap with a tall crown that was black in color. I also believe his shirt was a long-sleeve Western style with a Western print. A witness who was driving in the opposite direction on the roadway as the Jeep also got a good look at the vehicle. Diana Nair was driving east on Smithfield as the red Jeep was leaving the scene at a high rate of speed. She met him on the curve. She said the driver was a white male who was older, who looked like he had gray hair and was not wearing a hat. Carmel Ann Walton was jogging on Bursey, 150 yards west of Smithfield, when she saw the red Jeep careen by her. She did not notice the driver. Right across the street from the shooting at her residence at 7945 Smithfield Road, Jane Lukensow heard 2 shots and looked out her kitchen window. She heard 4 more shots. She saw the officer in the grass, leaning on his left elbow holding his leg. She did not see the Jeep. Michael Wright was at his home near the scene, and he saw a red Jeep Wrangler speeding by. He heard gunshots, and he saw the Jeep drive north on Smithfield. He described the driver as a big white male. Matt Bishop also heard the commotion and looked out his window, and he saw a red 80s Jeep with an old, ratty black soft top driving at a high rate of speed as an officer pursued on his motorcycle. The driver of the Jeep was a white male with light brown hair and no hat. Officer Garner, trained in firearms, noted that the handgun used by the suspect was a revolver. Quote, "It had a barrel length of at least 4 inches, although I'm quite certain it was more like a 6-inch barrel. The revolver had a blued finish. I believe it had the appearance of a Ruger Blackhawk or similar Western model revolver with a rounded backstrap," end quote. Recreating the shooting incident, the CSIs found that one of the suspect rounds hit the trunk of a stationary Lincoln town car parked in Jane Lukensow's circular driveway at 7945 Smithfield Road. The bullet was removed intact by Northeast Paint and Body. It was a .38 caliber with a right-hand twist. Striation patterns were documented and would be comparable to a suspect weapon if one should be located. There was a lot of criminal activity going on in the immediate area on that Monday, March 3rd. In the next town over, a bank robbery had gone down just minutes before the shooting of Officer Garner, a mere 2.26 miles away. Here's what happened. At 1:18 p.m., about 25 minutes before the shooting incident involving Officer Garner, a portly man walked into the Watauga branch of Bank 1, located at 6624 Watauga Road. A bank employee named Philip Galvin greeted him, saying, "Good afternoon, sir." The man approached the teller station and made very brief chit-chat about a transaction, and then handed teller Victoria Gomez a typed 8.5 by 11 size note. It read, "I am listening to a police radio. Put 10, 20, 50, and 100s in the bag. Use 2 teller windows. I have a .45 caliber weapon. I am a former teller. Do not use ink packs. I will leave quickly," end quote. The mention of the police scanner was presumably to warn the teller that he would know if she triggered the panic button. Victoria didn't really grasp what was going on, and she handed the note to teller Kathy Williams. Kathy gave the man $8,500 in cash, putting it into the bag he provided. 3 minutes after he entered the bank, the man left, got into the driver's seat of a red Jeep Wrangler parked outside, and drove off. An employee named Laura panicked and yelled out that the bank had just been robbed. A red Jeep Wrangler, just like the vehicle whose driver attempted to kill Officer Garner. Police on the bank case notified the investigators working Officer Garner's case, still processing the scene and interviewing him, that the bank robber and the attempted cop killer were almost certainly one and the same. The suspect met the description in a bolo sent out after the shooting, and so did his vehicle, the red Jeep. There were a lot of witnesses at the bank holdup. Remember, Officer Garner had described the man in the Jeep, whom he glimpsed twice, as a heavyset white male in his mid or upper 30s, between 5'7" and 5'10", clean-shaven with short dark hair and wearing a long-sleeve Western-style shirt with a dark hat with a tall crown. 7 witnesses at the bank described the man generally consistently. They all agreed he was a stocky or heavyset white male with a belly and dark hair. But then details diverged. Witness number 1 remembered the hat but could not describe it. However, they said the suspect had a mustache and a patch or something on his face. He was also wearing a dark jacket. Witness number 2 said the suspect was 5'7" and was wearing a cowboy hat and had an eye patch over his left eye. Witness number 3 also remembered the cowboy hat, but remembered a long Fu Manchu-style mustache. Witness number 4 thought the man was taller at 5'11" and that he was between 40 and 50. This witness described the cowboy hat the man was wearing as straw and said he ripped the hat off his head as he was walking out of the bank. Witness number 5 believed that the suspect was much shorter at 5'5". They remembered a light brown cowboy hat, but also recalled that the man was wearing jeans and a brown jacket, and he had an earpiece hanging from his ear. Witness number 6 was certain that the suspect had a black mustache that was disconnected at the sides, a patch over his left eye, acne scars on his face, a cowboy hat, a khaki jacket, and tight jeans. Witness number 7 recalled a brown eye patch and said the heavyset suspect was only about 5'7". At least 2 of the witnesses believed that the man was wearing some kind of makeup on his face. So, there were a lot of different descriptions of the details of the suspect's face. Officer Garner was fairly certain that the man he saw driving the Jeep was clean-shaven, although he possibly could have had a mustache. Many of the details jibed: a heavyset white male, mid to upper 30s, average height. The details that were finally settled on were that he was wearing a cowboy hat, a brown or tan heavyweight jacket, blue jeans, and tennis shoes. He had a large eye patch over his left eye and an earpiece in his left ear that connected to a cord that ran into his jacket. He wore a suspected fake handlebar mustache, and he had acne scars on his cheeks. The investigators just missed collecting a concrete piece of evidence from the robbery. After the whole thing was broadcast on the news, a citizen came forward and said that as they were driving down Watauga Road that day, sometime after the robbery had occurred, they saw a pale-colored cowboy hat lying in the road. They didn't stop to pick it up, and by the time the police got this report, the hat was long gone. But it did sound like the suspect had possibly tossed the hat out the window of his Jeep. FBI Special Agents Michael Elsey and Steve Kleinen obtained the video surveillance footage from the robbery, which was not of good quality because is it ever? But they were able to enhance it. It showed the portly suspect with a hat on and an eye patch over his left eye and a mustache. The outline of a possible gun could be seen in his pocket. A still photo of the suspect was printed for circulation and a bolo sent to area law enforcement agencies. A press release containing the photo was sent to local news stations for broadcasting. Several witnesses at the bank had also seen the Jeep. Witness number 1 said the Jeep was red and black and had a temporary white and black license plate on the back left corner of the Jeep's tailgate. This witness recalled a covered spare tire mounted on the back, very common on Jeep Wranglers. The second witness described the vehicle as a 2-door red Jeep Wrangler with a black top and large tires. This witness was certain there was no license plate on the front, but recalled 4 floodlights on the front with the letters KC across the front of the vehicle. And a third witness also described a red Jeep Wrangler with a light bar across the front with yellow KC light covers. The sighting at the scene of the armed bank robbery of the 2-door red Wrangler with the black soft top and temporary tags on the rear and no tags on the front, exactly the same as the vehicle described by Officer Garner, was correctly assumed not to be coincidental. The typed note handed over by the bank robber was left behind and processed for prints by the FBI, but only a partial, not sufficient for identification, was located. 3 $1 bills were found folded on the counter at teller station number 1 after the holdup. They were believed to have been dropped by the suspect out of his pocket when he pulled out the folded note because the bills were not handed to him by the teller. These $1 bills were also retained in evidence in case fingerprints were obtainable. Plaster casts of the tire impressions made by the Jeep in the field on Smithfield Road were collected. The whole scene was photographed and mapped, labels showing the bullet trajectories and locations of the Jeep and Officer Garner. A car dealership in Louisiana was contacted, and they faxed a copy of a Louisiana buyer's plate, which showed that the plate on the Jeep was definitely bogus. Local hospitals were contacted in the event that the suspect had sought medical care after being struck by Officer Garner's bullets. And speaking of hospitals, Officer Garner was kept in the hospital overnight, but was released on March 4th, no doubt very, very thankful that he had survived.
Want a $1,000 weight loss medication for $50? It all starts with Roe's free GLP-1 insurance check. Just upload your insurance card to see if you have coverage, then relax. Over 200,000 people have qualified for a $50 copay through Roe. Go to roe.co/health. Half of covered patients have a $50 per month copay or less for medication, plus $145 monthly Roe membership fee. Deductible cost may apply and final cost varies by insurance plan. For safety information about GLP-1 medications, including boxed warning, go to roe.co/safety, RX only.
The importance of Officer Garner's case within the North Richland Hills law enforcement agency cannot be overstated. It was classified as an attempted capital murder case. The suspect had knowingly attempted to kill an on-duty uniformed police officer, and it was worked accordingly. Video surveillance footage from the robbery was shown on the TV news, with requests for the public to call in if they had any information about who the suspect might be. And one of the first suspects who was seriously considered was Stephen P., a former Fairfield police officer who had resigned in early 2003. Detective Roten had gotten his name from a seemingly reliable tipster who said that Stephen P. was the North Richland Hills bank robber. Stephen drove a red Jeep Wrangler that had a dark soft top. He had a revolver, although it was a .22, not a .357. I don't know exactly why, but they looked hard at him, obtaining search warrants, Mirandizing him, subpoenaing his cell phone records, and other information. He took a polygraph exam, and I believe he passed because the 2003 detective's notes say that, quote, he's 99% eliminated, even though it's hard to believe there could be so many coincidences. Then the North Richland Hills police received a tip from a Mr. A.J., who said he thought the suspect captured in the bank robbery might be his nephew, John Allen. John Allen had served 8 years in federal prison for drug dealing. According to his uncle, he was a pretty bad dude who had faked his own murder in Jefferson, Texas, in order to avoid testifying at a trial of drug dealers he informed on. North Richland Hills PD contacted Rockwall County Sheriff's Office and obtained mugshots of Lloyd. The mugshots did not rule him out as a suspect. I don't know what happened to this lead, but it shows how little the investigators had to go on. They were looking for an average-looking, average-height, potentially balding, paunchy white male who drove a red Jeep Cherokee. Will the real Slim Shady please stand up? An association of 1,100 member banks across the Southwest offered a $25,000 reward for any citizen providing information leading to the arrest and indictment of the person responsible for shooting Officer Jeff Garner. An alert about this reward and the still photo of the suspect, taken from the surveillance footage, was sent to all the banks in the network for display at their branches. The FBI started to round up known bank robbers and check into their whereabouts on March 3, 2003. In mid-June, Detective Roten requested another press release to be sent out to the media seeking the public's help and informing them about the $25,000 reward. It was faxed to most newspapers, television, and radio stations in the area, but resulted in not one really promising lead. On June 25, 2003, Roten's report says, quote, there are only a few open leads and none of them look very close to the suspect and none of them have ties to a red Jeep. Investigation continues. In September, a meeting was held by the investigators working the case, including Officer Garner. They looked at 17 photos of possible suspects from leads received on the case. Officer Garner was asked to look at the photos one at a time. He ruled out all but 3, but even then, he did not believe he saw the man that shot at him in the photo array. In October, Detective Roten prepared another bulletin to be disseminated to law enforcement agencies in the southern U.S. They also arranged for Officer Garner to be hypnotized with a sketch artist, hoping that a detailed drawing of the suspect's face could be completed. But he couldn't recall enough detail to make a composite drawing, which is completely understandable as he only glimpsed the suspect as he was being shot at. In March 2004, Detective Roten obtained a lead concerning a David C. He was in the Collin County Jail after surrender to the FBI and admitting that he had committed bank robberies. However, later he recanted this confession about other bank robberies and then requested an attorney. In February 2005, Detective Roten saw an article in the Fort Worth Star-Telegram about a subject named Raymond Brown, who looked like the bank robbery suspect. And this was a promising lead because Raymond Brown was a serial armed robber. On January 14th, Brown and a guy named Russell Wentworth had gotten into a dispute outside a Fort Worth bar after Wentworth rammed Brown's truck because Brown was talking to Wentworth's wife. According to Brown, Wentworth pulled out a gun, so Brown pulled out his own gun and shot and killed Wentworth. Welcome to Texas. It was ruled a shooting in self-defense, but it also brought Brown to the attention of police, including a Detective Hargis, who remembered the license plate on a pickup truck associated with a recent robbery. Brown had robbed a Shell station at gunpoint on December 29th, and the same day walked into a Wells Fargo bank in Rome, Texas. He handed the teller a note ordering her to remain calm and demanding that she hand over all bills between $10 and $100 in her drawer. The note also told her to give him 10 minutes before calling police. He then drove off in a silver pickup with a large grill guard bumper. Then, in a January robbery of a Chevron station in Tarrant County, a man wearing a fake beard held a gun to the clerk and demanded all the cash in the store's till. This from the Fort Worth Star-Telegram, quote, the clerk told the man that because there had been no customers, the store didn't have any money. He responded by placing the gun to the woman's chest and demanding money again. She opened the register and showed the robber that it contained only change and 25 $1 bills, end quote. The robber declined this money and left in a pickup. But the savvy clerk quickly wrote down the license plate number. The number tracked back to an Enterprise rental car, not a pickup, that had been involved in a wreck, and the car was missing its front license plate. Police were at a loss as to who the Chevron robber was until Brown shot Wentworth outside the Grayson's County Line bar and was arrested. The clerk at the convenience store picked him out of a lineup, and a search of the truck found evidence linking him to some of the robberies. Authorities linked Brown to at least 5 robberies in Tarrant, Parker, and Wise counties over the previous month. So this Brown lead looked even more promising when Officer Garner took a look at the photo in the Fort Worth Star-Telegram of Brown and felt that he could be the man who shot him. This guy was a portly bank robber who liked shooting people and switching around license plates. Seemed like a slam dunk. Detective Roten dug into Brown. He learned that the weapon he used to kill Russell Wentworth was a Smith & Wesson .357 Blues Steel revolver. That fit the description of the gun seen by Officer Garner and was consistent with the .38 caliber round recovered from the trunk of the Lincoln and the partial round recovered from the dirt in the field. Detective Roten interviewed Brown's wife, who was devastated to hear her husband had been arrested for robbery. She said he had no association with Louisiana, had never owned a red Jeep, and didn't have any reason to wear an eye patch or an earpiece. She also never saw him wear a straw cowboy hat. He had been fired from his job at Nokia, but never told her that he had been fired. This led the investigator to believe that perhaps Brown had money problems he wanted to hide from his wife. He showed her the photo of the Watauga robbery suspect, and she said the subject was not her husband because he wasn't that big and his face was not that fat. Starting on February 8, 2025, Detective Roten worked this Brown lead with FBI Special Agent Andy Farrell, who had taken over the Watauga bank robbery case from Special Agent Mike Elsey. They submitted a request for a grand jury subpoena for Brown's employment records at Nokia and sent the gun used by Brown to kill Wentworth off for comparison to the bullet collected from the Lincoln. But it turned out that while Brown did own a .357, it was not consistent with the bullets fired from the North Richland Hills suspect's gun. And work records that police extensively analyzed provided an alibi for Brown during the time of the Watauga bank robbery and shooting. Brown was ruled out. In 2005, there was a major development in the case. Quote, on February 15, 2005, Detective Roten received a fax from Special Agent Farrell containing information about 6 bank robberies, including the Watauga case, which the FBI believed might be related and possibly committed by the same person, end quote, that from a police report. 6 bank robberies, possibly committed by the same guy. The pattern was noticed because the circumstances of the Watauga case were very similar to an Arlington, Texas bank robbery that took place a year earlier on July 23, 2002. According to the report, the suspect's physical description was almost identical, with a white straw cowboy hat, an earpiece in the left ear, a fake mustache and or goatee, an eye patch, and a typed demand note on plain Xerox paper he handed to the teller with very similar wording. So the FBI started looking at other cases in the region and noticed a pattern that could all be attributable to one dude. But they had no idea who he was. In 2007, North Richland Hills investigators started looking into a serial bank robber who had struck in the Tulsa, Oklahoma area in the same time frame as the Watauga robbery. The M.O. in the March 11, 2003 robbery was also similar. Tulsa area authorities had arrested a David Lee Dewey, a white male. He'd been arrested for a robbery in Moline, Illinois, and then had confessed to the robbery in Tulsa. Special Agent D.J. Dunlop of the FBI was working the Tulsa robberies as there was more than one. Dewey had been arrested in Texas in the past, showing that he had ties there, and his record showed multiple robberies, theft, and firearm offenses out of several states, including Florida, Illinois, Wisconsin, and Kansas. He had also confessed to investigators that he had shot a drug dealer in the foot, meaning he wasn't afraid to use his gun. A booking photo from a theft charge in Kansas was available from September 14, 2001, and it showed that Dewey matched the description of the Watauga suspect pretty nicely. Special Agent Dunlop felt Dewey might be a good suspect for the Watauga robbery. Dewey's case had been worked by FBI Special Agent Brian Sharkey. He said that Dewey started his bank robbery career with a white male accomplice named Joseph Poole. The two had met in prison, robbed some banks, and traveled with a carnival before going their separate ways. Detective Todd Noe of the Moline Police Department confirmed that the suspect, David Lee Dewey, had robbed a bank in Moline on April 16, 2003. He had worked with an accomplice, Timothy Shetler, and a woman named Jill Carrillo, but each also committed bank robberies individually. Detective Noe stated that he thought the group was linked to a total of 28 bank robberies. Dewey's male accomplice, Shetler, had called America's Most Wanted in 2003 and turned himself in for the Moline Bank robbery along with naming Dewey and Carrillo. Dewey was eventually caught in April 2003 and confessed to 11 bank robberies throughout the U.S., but not to the Watauga robbery. However, Special Agent Sharkey agreed that Dewey was a good suspect for that robbery, considering his description and the MO used. Dewey was known to use disguises and stolen license plates, and of course, the earpiece worn by the Watauga suspect could mean he was communicating with an accomplice, which Dewey was known to do. Also, the gun Dewey had used to shoot the drug dealer in Wisconsin was a revolver and possibly a .38 caliber. He was going to try to track down the gun. Special Agent Andy Farrell, who was working the Watauga robbery, agreed to send Sharkey some Watauga surveillance images and agreed that Dewey looked like a good lead. He and Special Agent Sharkey agreed that if Dewey did commit the Watauga robbery, he may not have confessed to it because he also shot an officer and would be facing a higher charge than just bank robbery. Dewey was convicted of the bank robberies he confessed to and sentenced to prison at the Federal Correctional Institute in Oxford, Wisconsin. His estimated release date at the time of the investigation into him was July 8, 2029. He was never fully cleared as the Watauga suspect.
This podcast is supported by MIDI Health. Are you in midlife, feeling dismissed, unheard, or just plain tired of the old healthcare system? You're not alone. For too long, women's serious midlife health issues have been trivialized, ignored, and met with a just deal with it attitude. Many of us have been made to feel ashamed or forgotten. In fact, even today, 75% of women seeking care for menopause and perimenopause issues are left entirely untreated. But here's the powerful truth. It's time for a change. It's time for MIDI. MIDI is not just a healthcare provider. It's a women's telehealth clinic, founded and supported by world-class leaders in women's health. What sets MIDI apart? We are the only women's telehealth brand covered by major insurance companies, making high-quality expert care accessible and affordable. Our clinicians provide one-on-one, face-to-face consultations where they truly listen to your unique needs. We offer a full range of holistic, data-driven solutions, from hormonal therapies and weight loss protocols to lifestyle coaching and preventative health guidance. This isn't one-size-fits-all care. This is care uniquely tailored for you. At MIDI, you will join our patients who feel seen, heard, and prioritized. You will find that our mission is clear: to help all women thrive in midlife, giving them access to the health care they deserve. Because we believe midlife isn't the middle at all. It is the beginning of your second act. Ready to feel your best and write your second act script? Visit joinmidi.com today to book your personalized insurance-covered virtual visit. That's joinmidi.com. MIDI, the care women deserve.
In April 2015, the Jeff Garner attempted capital murder case was assigned to Watauga detective Eric Whitlock. He wrote in a later probable cause affidavit, quote, "In or around June of 2015, I began focusing my investigation on a string of bank robberies that I believed had been perpetrated by the same suspect as the one who robbed the Bank One in Watauga and thus who shot Officer Garner. I believed the bank robberies were related based on several factors, including, but not limited to, several of them being linked by similar modus operandi, several having DNA connections, all of them having witness provided descriptions of the suspect's physical characteristics which were similar, and similar disguises/clothing accessories being utilized by the suspect for several of them," end quote. Whitlock was referring to the 6 bank robberies flagged by the FBI in 2005 as likely being related, but he also linked a 7th bank robbery in Tulsa to the other 6. Their suspect had robbed 7 banks throughout 3 states between 1998 and 2003 when Officer Garner was shot. The first of these robberies was the robbery of the UMB Oklahoma Bank at 10101 North Broadway Extension in Oklahoma City. On Saturday, October 24, 1998, when a guard and a teller arrived at 7:30 a.m., an armed suspect was waiting for them inside the bank. The masked robber brandished a revolver and forced the teller to hand over $14,900. He then shut the employees into the employee bathroom and told them the door was rigged to trigger a bomb if they opened it. He then disappeared. There are two different reports assessing how the suspect likely entered the bank. FBI investigators reported the armed bank robber had entered the bank by smashing a window and replacing the broken pane with a piece of plexiglass. He had then hidden inside the bank, awaiting employees' arrival so he could take them by surprise before the bank opened to the public. But according to Detective Eric Whitlock, who solved this case, there was also evidence that the suspect entered through an unarmed door that accessed a storage area in an adjacent building with an attic connection to the main part of the bank. He crawled through this area and dropped down into an unmonitored room, which did not have motion detectors. He cut a wire to the bank camera system, but knew enough not to cut the phone wire, which would have triggered a police notification. Surveillance footage was recovered from the bank, but the suspect was not shown on it, and the investigator discovered he had manually adjusted a camera to point to the ceiling. The guard and teller described the robber as having a large protruding belly. He was 5'8" or 5'9" and was wearing dirty blue jeans, gloves, and a red zip-front sweatshirt. He was also wearing a surgical mask under a pair of pantyhose over his head and face. In a field next to the bank, investigators working the bank robbery recovered the pantyhose, a mask with packaging, 3 plastic sacks, and a tube of facial makeup. This bank robbery went unsolved. The traumatized employees clearly didn't have a detailed description of their assailant. They didn't see which way he went when he left, and they didn't see a vehicle. A latent print on a soda can in the employee bathroom came back to, guess what, an employee. Video surveillance footage from inside the bank was poor quality and did not help the FBI identify the suspect. Robbery number 2 occurred 6 months later. On Saturday, April 24th, 1999, 3 employees arrived at the Bank First branch at 4500 West Memorial Road in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma. When the 2 tellers and a security guard entered the bank at 7:50 a.m., they were shocked to find a masked man already inside. He carried a walkie-talkie and had a revolver and pointed the weapon at them while telling them to open the vault. Once the vault was open, the robber shut the 3 employees in the bathroom and told the 3 victims that he had planted a bomb that would go off if they opened the door. He promised that he would call the police after he escaped to come and rescue them. One of the employees locked in the bathroom called 911 from a very early cell phone and reported that the bank had been robbed and the suspect told them he had planted a bomb. Law enforcement responded in force to the bank as a hostage situation was suspected. The FBI arrived. I can hear the voice of Hans Gruber. And Oklahoma City police tactical teams and FBI sharpshooters surrounded the bank. They held things down for 3 hours before deciding to go in. A SWAT team rushing into the bank found the employees unharmed in the bathroom. The suspect had tied a wire from the exterior knob of the bathroom door to another doorknob, which placed tension on the bathroom door and made it impossible to open. No bombs were detected. Again, FBI investigators noted the armed robber had entered the bank by smashing a window and replacing the broken pane with a piece of plexiglass. This time, as would be expected, the smashed window had triggered an alarm, and the police responded to the bank at 12:30 a.m. But they didn't notice the plexiglass window replacement because the robber swept the broken glass into a nearby bush and an interior closet. The police thought it was a false alarm and left. It was unknown whether, after putting the plexiglass in place, the robber stayed outside the bank until after the police responded to the alarm before entering, or just hid inside the bank the whole time, maybe snoozing a little, waiting for the employees to arrive in the morning. When they did, he got the vault opened and locked them up. When the police got the phone call from the employee in the bathroom, it being the second alert from the same bank in 7 hours, they went into tactical response mode immediately, but it was all for nothing. The FBI concluded that the robber left the bank almost immediately after locking the employees in the WC. $22,184 was missing from the vault. The robber was described by the employees as an overweight white male in his late 20s or early 30s, 5 foot 8 inches tall, 200 to 230 pounds. His facial features were undistinguishable because he was wearing both a surgical mask and a stocking over his head. As for his clothing, he was wearing blue jeans, a light blue flannel shirt, brown knit gloves, black shoes, and a blue baseball hat over the stocking. But again, the robber, who clearly had meticulously planned the robbery, left 2 things behind in a field near the scene: packaging from a tube of makeup and a brown knit glove with blood on the inside. Investigators believed that the suspect cut himself breaking the glass, and they kept the glove in evidence. A security guard named Richard D. had been on duty when the bank was robbed. After the whole thing was over, teller Lacey Biffle told police that the security guard had acted suspiciously, and she thought he might have been in cahoots with the robber. He had drawn his weapon upon seeing the suspect in the bank, but the suspect displayed his gun and threatened to shoot Richard and the employees, so Richard relinquished his weapon. In other words, the security he provided was non-existent. Investigators took a hard look at Richard, but in the end were not able to connect him to the crime. 5 months later, the suspect struck again, this time in Wichita, Kansas. On Friday, September 3rd, 1999, he hit the Commerce Bank at 1250 South Woodlawn. Again, sometime during the night, he broke out a bank window, but this time did not replace it with plexiglass. The room was not alarmed, and he must have known that. Then he waited in the bank and surprised employees arriving at 7 a.m. Again, he told the employees that he was listening to the police scanner, brandished a revolver, and ordered the employees to hand over the cash. He also, for some reason, felt the need to explain that he had farm debt that he needed to pay off. This time, he made away with $215,000 and the car keys to an employee's vehicle. After he dashed out the door, he drove off in the stolen car. This car was later found about a 10-minute walk away, parked at a nearby business. Police believed the robber had parked his own vehicle 10 minutes away and walked to the bank to commit the robbery. Clearly, even though it was risky to use an employee's car, the robber had decided it was worth it to avoid his own car being seen by witnesses or captured on bank surveillance. In this Wichita robbery, the robber didn't leave behind items he had brought with him. Perhaps he was learning from his previous mistakes. But he left part of himself behind. Blood on the couch in one of the bank offices. He had cut himself breaking the window. Samples were collected of this blood, but unfortunately they were never tested and were later destroyed. Latent prints were lifted from a piece of broken glass from the window. They were APHIS quality lifts, but they did not come back to anyone. The fourth robbery suspected to be attributable to the same suspect occurred in Fort Worth, Texas on October 13, 2001. At the Frost National Bank at 5651 Bryant Irvin Road, the suspect used the same plexiglass trick to get inside the bank. An alarm was activated. The Fort Worth police came but did not notice any broken glass because it was hidden somewhere, and the officers went away after concluding it was a false alarm. I don't know why there wasn't some kind of notification being made by the FBI to the banks in this tri-state region that middle-of-the-night alarms could mean this plexiglass trick was being used, but I'm certainly not a security expert. The suspect in this robbery was described as being 5 foot 4 inches tall, 180 pounds, and heavy set. He was wearing a white t-shirt, navy blue zip-up jacket, dark sweatpants, white tennis shoes, and was wearing a blue surgical mask with pantyhose pulled over his head. The suspect brandished a revolver in his left hand to intimidate the bank employees and told them he was listening to the police scanner, so not to try anything. He didn't get much cash this time, just about $1,428. Again, he stole the vehicle of an employee, Joy Cross, when he left, driving it about a 7-minute walk away to where his own vehicle was waiting. This time, a witness saw a man meeting the description of the bank robber parking Joy's car and getting into a white, mid-1990s SUV with Oklahoma tags. The pantyhose were recovered, and a latent print was lifted from the side mirror of the teller's stolen car. A witness, seeing the suspect without his disguise as he fled from the bank, said he had brown hair that was thin at the crown. I was told that the FBI barely investigated this bank robbery as they were in the thick of working on the 9/11 disaster. The fifth robbery took place in Arlington, Texas on Tuesday, July 23, 2002. This time, the bandit didn't break any windows or hide in shadows in the bank. Cool as a cucumber, wearing a cowboy hat, he walked into the Frost Bank at 1881 Ballpark Way and handed a typed demand note to the teller. As in the Watauga robbery, the note mentioned a weapon and that the suspect was listening to the police scanner, and he also had a visible earpiece in his left ear. The note also warned of an armed accomplice, as far as the teller could recall. The note was taken away by the suspect when he left. The teller handed over $33,604 and the man left the bank. 2 vehicles were reported by witnesses to have been seen speeding away from the bank. One was a black Mustang and the other was a dark-colored pickup truck. The witnesses, bank employees David Cameron and Carol Cook, said the suspect wore a fake-looking mustache and goatee and an eye patch, and he was a heavyset white male, about 5'8", 200 pounds. Surveillance video reviewed by investigators from the bank and the gas station across the street showed that the suspect was portly with a protruding belly and wearing a light-colored cowboy hat. Notably, he wore a white, long-sleeved Orkin Pest Control Company shirt. This shirt was found discarded in the street in the 2300 block of Ascension Boulevard and was collected by investigators. A blue Adidas shirt was also found lying in the road at 1900 Brown Boulevard. It was unknown whether this was related to the crime, but it too was collected. The sixth robbery was back in Oklahoma, this time in Tulsa. On Friday, February 21, 2003, the suspect robbed the Mid-First Bank at 9139 South Yale Avenue. This time again, he didn't break any windows or hide in shadows in the bank. He casually walked in at 12:15 p.m., wearing a cowboy hat and carrying a white plastic bag. He went up to the teller at the desk and initially did not speak, but gestured to the teller that he had a weapon. He didn't actually show the weapon, and indicated she should give him the money in her drawer. Then he indicated he was listening to the police scanner, presumably on the corded earpiece he was wearing. She put $1,635 in his bag, and he walked out. Surveillance footage of the area reviewed by investigators captured the suspect getting into a white SUV parked outside the bank. Based on those images, it was later determined that the suspect vehicle was a mid-1990s Land Rover Range Rover SE 4.0 with an aftermarket sunroof visor and Oklahoma tags. I guess the bank robbery business was lucrative if he's driving a Range Rover. This vehicle was consistent with the mid-90s white SUV with Oklahoma tags seen by a witness after the October 2001 Fort Worth robbery. Descriptions of the suspect were generally consistent with the other robberies. He was a portly white male, mid-40s, as heavy as 210 pounds, about 5'8" tall. He wore a very distinctive white Fair Isle-style collared sweater and a white straw cowboy hat. He had a beard, but based on previous robberies suspected to be attributable to the same guy, the investigators believed the beard was fake. He also had an earpiece in his left ear. This time, though, employees got close enough to see that the suspect had a pockmarked face. Investigators were able to lift one latent print from the countertop where the robber interacted with the teller. Video surveillance footage was collected and enhanced by the FBI. It shows the suspect clearly, but his face is hard to make out. The original detective for the Tulsa PD who worked the bank robbery had collected still images of the Range Rover and showed them to the local Land Rover dealership, and a Land Rover employee identified the vehicle as being a 1996 to 2001 Range Rover SE 4.0. This was later narrowed down to 1995. The final robbery suspected to have been committed by the same guy took place just 10 days after the Tulsa robbery. This was the one in Watauga that preceded North Richland Hills Officer Garner being shot by the man driving the red Jeep. The M.O. was almost identical. He walked into the bank wearing a cowboy hat, an earpiece, and suspected fake facial hair. He handed a demand note to the teller saying he had a gun, but the teller did not see the revolver. He made off with $8,500. This time, the suspect description also included acne scars on his face. When North Richland Hills Detective Eric Whitlock picked up the case, he reviewed the 2005 facts from the FBI suggesting that 5 other bank robberies were linked to his Watauga robbery. 3 of them were the ones he was already looking into as possibly related to Watauga, the 2 in Oklahoma City and the one in Arlington. But there were others as well. Detective Roten, his predecessor on the case, had apparently believed some of these were the work of David Dewey, the bank robbery perpetrator whom I discussed earlier. Detective Whitlock started to gather information on these cases, quote, in hopes that if any of the cases could be solved, then it would net our suspect as well, end quote. Detective Whitlock told me his goal in investigating these connected bank robberies was always to identify the man who had attempted to kill Officer Garner. He eventually obtained reports on the robberies from all the local agencies and the FBI. He noted that the 2 Oklahoma City cases, Fort Worth and Wichita, all used the same MO with the plexiglass and waiting for the employees. He also noted that the MO and suspect description in Watauga and Arlington were identical. And in all of the cases, the suspect had discarded the disguise materials he had used as he drove away. Note that the facial hair was always over the top, a very large goatee, an impressive handlebar mustache. But Detective Whitlock learned they also had DNA connections. He learned the glove collected after the 1999 Oklahoma City robbery yielded a DNA profile. The white Orkin shirt found after the Arlington robbery yielded a DNA profile. And the pantyhose found after the first robbery in Oklahoma City yielded a DNA profile. All 3 profiles were entered into CODIS, which confirmed that they were from the same person. Furthermore, after consulting with the FBI, Detective Whitlock learned that the plexiglass trick had not been used in any other known robberies. The fact that it was used in 4 robberies in which the suspect looked similar indicated that they were almost certainly connected. He also noted that there was another robbery that had been suspected to be the work of David Dewey, but had turned out not to be. Dewey had been suspected of a whole slew of bank robberies, but there was another one in Tulsa on February 21, 2003 that turned out not to be him. Whitlock obtained the file from Tulsa and noted the similarities between Tulsa and Watauga. The overweight white suspect wore an earpiece in his left ear and had acne scarring on his face. The description was nearly identical to the suspect description in Watauga and Arlington. This from the Fort Worth Star-Telegram, quote, Whitlock said the suspect description linked all the robberies together, including 3 that found the same DNA at the scene. In the Arlington, Tulsa, and Watauga bank robberies, the suspect had a cowboy hat, fake facial hair, an earpiece or communication device in his ear, Whitlock explained. The strategy became to solve any one of those bank robberies and potentially have a suspect for our Watauga bank robbery, end quote. Whitlock learned that the Oklahoma City cases were still being worked by the FBI, who had filed a DNA indictment of John Doe's DNA profile to stop the statute of limitations, which is generally 5 years in bank robberies, surprisingly, from tolling. Whitlock obtained the white Orkin shirt and the blue Adidas shirt from Arlington PD and entered them into evidence in his case. He submitted them, along with the demand note from the Watauga robbery, to the University of North Texas DNA lab. The hope was to obtain a complete nuclear and YSTR profile from the shirt and touch DNA from the note in order to conduct familial searches. The Tarrant County Medical Examiner's Office said based on the DNA profiles on the 2 shirts, the owners were not related. As for the demand note, the lab could obtain no usable DNA from it.
I'm Serena Williams, and I'm healthier on Ro. I've lost 34 pounds in a year with GLP-1s, diet, and exercise. On Ro, you can access GLP-1 options, including the first FDA-approved GLP-1 pill for weight loss. Go to ro.co/journey to see if you qualify. 14 to 20% average weight loss in 1 year in non-diabetics with obesity or overweight with a weight-related medical condition versus 2.2% to 3.1% in placebo arm. RX only. To stay informed about serious side effects, go to ro.co/safety.
Pros, save more on what you need to get the job done right. Right now at Lowe's. Get 15% off select custom entry and interior doors. Plus, save $80 on the DeWalt 20-volt Max 2-tool combo kit. Now just $169. And at the Lowe's Pro Desk, bring us your materials list and get a quote in minutes. Handwritten, a photo, or even a sticky note is all you need. Keep your jobs moving faster and on budget at Lowe's. Valid through 7/8 while supplies last. Selection varies by location.
Detective Whitlock wanted to amass as much evidence as possible in the bank robbery cases, but he was disappointed to learn that much of it led nowhere or had been destroyed, which is incredibly frustrating, especially considering that these robberies happened during the DNA era. In the Wichita case from 1999, blood and 4 APHIS quality prints had been collected by the CSIs. Notes say blood never tested for DNA evidence, destroyed. 4 APHIS quality prints entered into APHIS but removed after statute expiration, destroyed. From the Fort Worth robbery on October 13, 2001, video surveillance destroyed. Black stocking recovered, never tested for DNA, destroyed. Latent fingerprint located on the exterior mirror of teller Joy Cross's stolen vehicle ended up belonging to her son. He was polygraphed in September 2015 and did not resemble the suspect. From the Tulsa robbery, the 2 fingerprints from the counter in front of the teller collected after this robbery had been destroyed in 2011 due to an administrative decision. But a digital copy of one of them remained. Detective Whitlock sent it to a print examiner at the FBI, who was able to get it into APHIS. There were no hits. Quote, it was explained to me that the FBI's APHIS database and the state databases were separate, and it was up to the states to submit prints to the FBI's APHIS database, end quote. They arranged for the print to be sent to the state databases in Texas, Louisiana, Oklahoma, and Kansas. Then, in October of 2015, Detective Whitlock submitted the remaining print from the Tulsa robbery to all 50 states. Nothing. In February 2015, he assessed the physical evidence remaining from the Watauga robbery. They had the original VHS tape of surveillance video, the demand note, the bullets fired at Officer Garner, and the 3 $1 bills the suspect touched. He handed everything over to FBI Special Agent Jay Noble for processing of the evidence and enhancement of the video. The demand note was entered into the FBI's database. The FBI was able to enhance the video, and images of the suspect were printed and added to the file. In 2015, Detective Whitlock started lining up local businesses and churches to contribute to a reward fund. He quickly amassed $13,000, more than the robber got in some of his jobs. On September 14, 2015, Detective Whitlock arranged for Victoria Gomez, the original teller, to submit to hypnosis with the Texas Rangers. A sketch was done by a forensic artist based on her recall, as well as that of 2 other employees present during the robbery. The sketch was circulated to the public. Detective Whitlock then set up a website with photos and information about the crime, the reward, and the suspect. The website advertising the $13,000 reward went live in January of 2016. The image of the bank robber was also placed on the bankrobbers.fbi.gov website. A social media blitz was conducted, and 10 new leads were generated. Detective Whitlock followed up on all those leads, including obtaining buccal swabs from people who were said to resemble the suspect and who had 1 or 2 factors that made them interesting. On September 24, 2015, Detective Whitlock met with OG Bank employee Philip Galvin and showed him the sketch. Philip recommended that the sketch be adjusted to include more acne scarring and chubbier cheeks. Detective Whitlock tried obtaining a list of Jeep Wranglers registered in Oklahoma, but there were 8,000 of them. He had Texas DPS use their facial recognition software on the detailed suspect sketch and obtained a list of the top 9 possible results. In April of 2016, he met with a cold case review team in Austin and reviewed the case with the experts on the team. In June of 2016, he obtained the fired bullet and copper jacket from the suspect's weapon and secured them in evidence. He was getting all his ducks in a row in case they found a suspect. Let's talk about some later suspects. In February of 2014, FBI Special Agent Andy Farrell had brought a new suspect to North Richland Hills Detective Sergeant M. Shelley, who had the Garner case at that time. This suspect was a Jesse Gamboa. Gamboa was being investigated by the Texas Rangers, WCSO, and FBI regarding a series of bank robberies. He was finally arrested for robbing a bank in Schwerner, Texas on October 31, 2013. He was suspected in 17 other robberies between 2002 and 2013, including in Fort Worth. He ended up pleading guilty in February 2015 to the bank robbery in Schwerner and got 20 years. Gamboa looked like a great suspect for the series of 7 robberies Detective Whitlock had tied together. He robbed banks, he used a gun, and he supposedly had an eye injury, which could explain why the suspect wore an eye patch. But it all fell apart. Detective Shelley tested 2 guns collected from Gamboa to the recovered bullets from the Garner shooting, and they did not match. Gamboa was not connected in any way to a red Jeep, nor were any of his family or known associates. The eye injury was actually a scar on his forehead from an attack by a fellow prison inmate in 1992, although Gamboa admitted that it had resulted in him being fully blind in his left eye, the same one the suspect wore a patch on. An interview with his ex-girlfriend revealed that in 2003, he drove a white truck, not a Jeep, and he did not look like the suspect in the 2003 surveillance still. He did not have acne scars, as described by some witnesses, but he did have some scarring on his face in the form of light or superficial cuts that had healed. The North Richland Hills investigators interviewed Gamboa in prison in July of 2015. He already knew they were eyeing him for Watauga, as the FBI had questioned him about it. He started talking about himself, the I-35 bandit, in the third person. He said the I-35 bandit would not rob a bank that far off the highway. Furthermore, he said the man in the surveillance photograph was a big fat white guy. He denied ever having tried to kill anyone. He didn't appear nervous or that he was lying. In the end, they never could connect Gamboa to Watauga. Detective Whitlock's report says that as of July 8, 2015, the lead involving Jesse Gamboa has been all but exhausted at this time. With no further information to the contrary, it is believed he did not commit the bank robbery or shoot Officer Garner. One potential suspect Detective Whitlock focused on for a time was Donald Ray Ladd. Ladd was a longtime bank robber, first being arrested by the feds after robbing the Superior Federal Bank in Fort Smith, Arkansas, in January of 1992. The money the teller handed him concealed a dye pack that exploded in the bag, spraying him with red dye, and a high-speed chase in a stolen car and wild gunshots ensued. Ladd also ended up being convicted of robbing several Oklahoma City banks in the early 1990s, holding up the financial institutions with a sawed-off shotgun. After doing his time, Ladd returned to his old ways, despite giving the 1992 judge and the victims a very sincere-sounding apology in court. He was arrested again for robbing a People's State Bank in Lawton, Oklahoma on October 13, 2005. He also confessed to robbing 2 banks in Shawnee in February 2003, an Oklahoma City bank on January 13, 2005, and an Enid bank on May 12, 2005. In 2 of the robberies, Ladd wore a gray wig and displayed a pellet gun. He pleaded guilty in 2006 to robbing the People's First Bank in Lawton, Oklahoma, armed with a gun. So obviously, Donald Ladd checked the boxes in many ways. But in revisiting him, Detective Whitlock felt that while Ladd looked like the Watauga suspect, he was 6'1", which was too tall. And at age 59, when he was arrested in 2005, he was too old to be the suspect from Watauga. There was nothing connecting him to any of the 7 robberies Detective Whitlock was looking at. And finally, when they ran his DNA, it did not match the sample believed to have been left by the suspect on the glove and other items collected from various robbery scenes. Ladd was eliminated. Another potential suspect had been named early on but never eliminated. Richard V. was a suspected lookout during the Arlington robbery. A man of his description had been loitering at the gas station across the street, watching the bank nonstop. When the robbery suspect left the bank, 2 vehicles were seen speeding away, and one was a black Mustang like the one Richard drove. The Orkin shirt worn by the robber was discarded on a street within a mile of Richard's apartment, and the street was the only means of entry to the complex. Richard's wife also said he was obsessed with police activity and listened to the scanner often. Richard had been questioned extensively by the FBI after the Arlington robbery, but lawyered up. Detectives Shelley and Whitlock interviewed Richard on September 8, 2015. He agreed to speak with them and denied involvement, but he refused to give a buccal swab or submit to voice analysis. They told him the statute of limitations had passed and no one could be charged criminally for Arlington. They told him there was a $10,000 reward for information, hoping he would give up whoever the main robber was, but he did not. They didn't feel he was being particularly deceptive, but his hands were shaking a little. They had to backburner Richard V. In 2013, the DNA profile on the blue Adidas shirt recovered after the Arlington murder came back to a Randall Lee Kyle Jr., a convicted drug dealer in Oklahoma. He was living in Arlington at the time. Detectives Whitlock and Shelley interviewed Kyle in September of 2013. He had no idea why his shirt was in the road, but he said he and his girlfriend often went to Six Flags. The detectives believed him that he was not involved. Neither was his father, who had been arrested for unlawful possession of police scanning equipment, which he used to avoid police raids of his drug business. He was incarcerated at the time of the Oklahoma City, Wichita, and Fort Worth robberies, meaning he had not done Arlington either, and therefore not Watauga. Charles Wood was a serial bank robber who drew Detective Whitlock's attention in October 2015 because he looked like the Watauga suspect, being a heavyset white male with a protruding stomach. He had been arrested by Sugar Land PD after a bank robbery and high-speed chase. Wood was known to have committed bank robberies in Texas, Oklahoma, Kansas, and additional states. But Wood's DNA was in CODIS and had not matched to the DNA profile of the unidentified Arlington glove dropper, so he was eliminated. Detective Whitlock even revisited the original suspect, Stephen P. He was the best OG lead, but he was 6'1", and Whitlock didn't think that he was their guy, but he'd never been ruled out by DNA. By the time Whitlock reconsidered Stephen P., he'd been arrested and convicted on an unrelated sexual assault charge. His DNA was in CODIS and was not a match for the robbers. Detective Whitlock turned back to the physical evidence he had to work with. On April 26, 2016, he took the glove from the 1999 Oklahoma City robbery to the University of North Texas lab and turned it over for processing. On December 16, 2016, senior forensic analyst Rachel Birch with the UNT lab informed Detective Whitlock that the lab was able to obtain a YSTR profile from the suspect glove. This was really good news because it meant that they could conduct a familial DNA search in the Texas State DNA database. All the paperwork was done, and the profile was submitted to CODIS. Detective Whitlock's report says, quote, "On May 13, 2017, I learned that the familial search was compared against 862,662 profiles. None of the subjects compared for candidates for relation to the YSTR profile submitted of our suspect." Whoever the robber was, the DNA of his close male relatives was not in the Texas Offender DNA database. Follow-up familial searches were conducted in June 2018 and March 2021 with no success. Detective Whitlock was disappointed to learn that Louisiana, Oklahoma, and Kansas do not do familial DNA searches. Detective Whitlock spent the next several months tracking down tips called in after the media blitz and investigating the various suspects. On February 13, 2018, he authorized the use of the DNA sample extracted by the UNT lab from the glove to be sent to Parabon, who could provide a genetic snapshot of the suspect. His report says, "On March 15th, I received the snapshot which was age-enhanced to match the most likely age range of our suspect at the time of the event. The report indicated, with high certainty, that the suspect had very fair skin, hazel or brown eyes, brown hair, and Northern European ancestry." Detective Whitlock requested Parabon to conduct a genetic genealogy screening of the suspect DNA profile to see if an IgG investigation was feasible. However, on June 5, 2018, he learned there were no promising matches. So he released the snapshot created by Parabon to the public in October 2018. The articles about the image were titled things like, "Police Still Hunting Bank Robber Who Shot North Richland Hills Officer 15 Years Ago." 4 really viable leads were called in. The most promising of these was an anonymous tip called into Crime Stoppers naming a former boyfriend of the caller's mother, a man named Jamie M. from Mineral Wells. The caller claimed Jamie had robbed a bank in 2005. Sure enough, Detective Whitlock found Jamie's name in the case file as a lead that had not been thoroughly vetted. Jamie had been arrested for 7 bank robberies in Texas in 2007, at least one of which had been with an accomplice. His mugshot showed that his facial shape was similar to the suspect's, as was his body type. But in November 2018, Detective Whitlock learned that Jamie's DNA profile was in the federal level of CODIS, meaning that his DNA did not match the suspect DNA. Another suspect was Greg Lavers of Fort Worth, arrested on June 9, 2003 in Oklahoma, and suspected in several other bank robberies in the 2001 to 2002 timeframe. His targets included numerous bank ones, in particular one in Wichita Falls, Texas. Whitlock confirmed Lavers' DNA was in CODIS. His report reads, quote, "While he does not appear to be our suspect, it cannot be ruled out that he doesn't possibly know our shooter, based on some of the circumstances related to the Oklahoma bank robberies. This lead will remain open." In February of 2019, Detective Whitlock learned from FBI Special Agent M. Jamerson of the Oklahoma City office that starting in 2018, law enforcement could access the DNA database in Family Tree DNA. Family Tree DNA required uploads to be done directly by law enforcement. But when Detective Whitlock tried to upload in July 2019, he was told their terms of service allowed only examination of cases involving homicide, sexual assault, or unidentified human remains. Attempted murder and bank robbery did not qualify. On March 15, 2019, the Parabon computer-generated sketch was added to the North Richland Hills Police website and Facebook page, and a media release was conducted in conjunction with the FBI and local media that focused on the images from the Arlington, Tulsa, and Watauga bank robberies. The reward of $13,000 still stood, the public was reminded. The release said, "Our team and Captain Garner still hold out hope that the answer to the case is out there. We remember this day and stand with Jeff as we still search for the answer, who shot Jeff Garner?" Well, it would take IgG to find the answer to that question. This is the end of Part 1 of the case of Officer Jeff Garner. Part 2 is available right now.